Parametric modeling is a very powerful technique. However, at some point you're going to need to convert a parametric model to an editable model. This is also known as collapsing the modifier stack or baking the model. There are many reasons to do this. One of them is performance. If you have a complex modifier stack, that's going to use up memory. It's also going to take longer to load because 3ds Max has to calculate all of the operations within the stack. However, a parametric model almost always takes up less disk space than an editable model, so it's a trade-off. There are more reasons why you may wish to collapse the modifier stack. Sometimes you'll need to convert to editable simply to use some tool that is not implemented as a modifier. Maybe you need 100% compatibility with other programs, such as game engines. Another reason for collapsing the stack is future-proofing your work. If you open a scene with a complex stack in some future version of 3ds Max, the behavior of the modifiers may have changed. The result may be different. It could be an extreme change where the model is completely corrupted, or it could be a subtle change that might pass unnoticed. Whatever the reason for collapsing the stack, it's always a best practice to save a backup first. A parametric model is like a recipe or instructions for creating something. It is not the baked cake or the finished result. In other words, when you create a parametric model, such as this monitor stand, in the Modify panel, you'll see you have a stack of effects, and those are instructions for building the object. Every time 3ds Max loads this scene, it follows those instructions, and it creates a box with certain parameters, applies a taper with certain parameters, and so on. And we end up with the same result each time as long as the behavior of those modifiers has not changed. To future-proof this project, I want to convert this object to editable poly, and that will also give me the full range of polygon tools available. Converting to editable, or baking the model, is destructive and non-reversible. We cannot unbake a cake. If we converted to editable and then saved over the top of this scene file, it would be like baking the cake and then throwing away the recipe. I want to keep this recipe. I want to keep the parametric version on disk in case I need to go back to it, just as an insurance policy. Before I make any changes to this scene, I'm going to save the scene to a new file name. I always recommend this in any program, but especially in 3D, where things are really complicated and tend to go awry all the time. Before you perform any destructive edit, save your file to a new file name. Then make the changes in the new file. That way you're not touching the original file. My current file is 0506 versioning.max, as we see in the title bar. I'm going to save this out before making any changes. Go to the File menu and choose Save As. I'll save into my current project's Scenes folder. I'll call it 0506 versioning _ baked, B-A-K-E-D, and click Save. If I ever need to go back to the parametric version, I can always open up the old file. Converting a parametric model to an editable model is really easy. You can do it in a couple of different ways. One is to collapse the modifier stack. If you right-click on the topmost modifier, you'll get a pop-up menu from which you can choose to collapse all. Collapse all converts the entire modifier stack to an editable mesh. There's also collapse to. If you select some modifier in the middle of the stack, such as the taper, and right-click and choose collapse to, it will convert the currently selected modifier and anything below it to an editable mesh, but it will preserve the modifiers above it. I'm not going to do either of those, actually, because those commands convert to an editable mesh, which is not really what I want. So I'll click off of that. There are two types of polygon objects in 3ds Max. Editable mesh is the older, more antique version, and editable poly is the newer, much more advanced polygon object. If I want to make subsequent changes to this model, then I'll want to convert to editable poly. And that's not available from the modifier stack itself. It is available from the quad menu. Select the object, right-click in the viewport, and at the bottom of the quad menu, choose Convert to Editable Poly. Now I've collapsed the stack. We no longer have a parametric model. There's no box, no taper, and no bend. But we have all of these other tools available to us now. If we save the scene now and reopen it, we can never get back to the original modifier parameters. And that's why I saved out to a new file name before performing that destructive conversion. And of course, having made that change, I want to save my scene, so I'll just choose File, Save. That's how to version a scene file before performing a destructive change, such as converting a parametric model to an editable poly. That wraps up the chapter on parametric modeling with modifiers.